These are actually some of the smartest crimes criminals do. Let's find out, starting with number 6, Mr. Woodberry. Olalekan Jacob Ponle, aka Mr. Woodberry, and also aka Mark Kain, is a Nigerian citizen and resident in the United Arab Emirates. He's finally been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Ponle orchestrated a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that targeted businesses across the United States, pulling off an elaborate phishing scam. This case showcased how cyber criminals like Ponle, who's a minor celebrity in Nigeria due to his displays of wealth on social media, used his notoriety to mastermind his criminal activities. Working with a network of scammers, they posed as legitimate corporate entities through phishing emails, convincing employees to send money under the guise of being instructed by their employers. But Ponle's ingenious scheme didn't stop at mere email scams. He also relied on a network of mules to receive the ill-gotten funds and convert them into Bitcoin, allowing him to launder the money. He led a famously lavish lifestyle that he and his renowned partner scammer Hush Puppy showcased on social media. Hush Puppy himself got 11 years behind bars. Despite the absence of an extradition treaty between the UAE and the United States, federal officials worked tirelessly to secure Ponle's return to the United States for prosecution. He was finally extradited to the U.S. back in July of 2020. To make amends for his crimes, Ponle gave up not only his luxurious assets, including his high-end vehicles, but also paid more than $8 million in restitution to the companies he stole from. Additionally, he surrendered 151 Bitcoin to the U.S. government. Number 5. Unclaimed Winnings. A couple in Australia has been sentenced to jail for a gambling scam that got them $600,000 by cashing in unclaimed betting slips. The scheme was masterminded by Trevor Raine, an IT specialist at TABcorp, a well-known gambling organization in Australia. TAB stands for the Totalizator Agency Board, which is a term for organizations in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa that manage betting shops and online betting services. Raine, along with his wife Talanoa, came up with a clever plan to target bets that had been successful but hadn't been collected for over 3 months. Raine's position at TABcorp allowed him access to the organization's system where he could find these winning codes. They duplicated the barcode, created their own tickets, and printed them at home. They started the scam by cashing in 9 tickets for a total of $4,000. However, their greed grew as they committed the crime more frequently, handing over as many as 260 successful bets in a single day, totaling $60,000. To avoid raising suspicion, they kept each winning transaction below $10,000, as exceeding this amount would trigger a government review. The couple attributed their criminal activities to Sydney's housing crisis, claiming unpaid bills and mortgage repayments were their motivation. They said they had no choice but to scam to deal with their financial difficulties. Their fraudulent activities finally caught up with them when a customer tried to cash in an old ticket and was told that the bet had already been redeemed. Phone recordings of conversations between the couple confirmed that they were running the scam to pay for their home. In the end, Mrs. Raine was sentenced to 1 year and 3 months in prison for her role in the scam, while Mr. Raine received a longer sentence of 2 years and 4 months. That's a pretty harsh punishment for essentially picking up discarded lotto tickets to see if they won, though, isn't it? Number 4. Three's Company. In a bizarre scheme that unfolded in Las Vegas, 3 women orchestrated a fake auto accident scam that left unsuspecting drivers stunned and broke. The story began when the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department started receiving reports of suspicious accidents. What made these cases unusual was the brazenness of the criminals involved. The 3 women at the heart of this operation, later identified as Barbara Miller, Amanda Miller, and Sophia Nicholas, devised a plan to part innocent people from their hard-earned cash. The trio would prowl parking lots or hit the open road looking for unsuspecting victims. Upon spotting a target, they'd claim that the victim had scraped their car, coercing them to pull over. Then, with a masterful sleight of hand, they'd divert the driver's attention while simultaneously rifling through the victim's vehicle for valuables. They'd even inflict minor damage on the victim's car, making it seem as if a collision had occurred. Once the victims were suitably disoriented and anxious about the supposed accident, the scammers would demand an on-the-spot cash settlement for the fictional damages. Their approach left drivers feeling confused, trapped, and coerced into handing over their money. In some instances, they actually forced victims into driving them to an ATM to get some cash. Amanda Miller, perhaps overconfident from her previous exploits, was apprehended at a Kohl's department store. Kohl's is a department store where people commonly go to return stuff they purchased on Amazon, for those of you who don't know. Miller tried to apply for a credit card using a fake ID and also attempted to shoplift. If she didn't do this, then they wouldn't have gotten caught. As officers engaged Amanda Miller, her mother Barbara, and her accomplice Sophia Nicholas arrived at the scene, presumably to rescue their partner in crime. However, their arrival became the turning point that led to their downfall. After running their names through the database, officers discovered outstanding warrants related to the staged accident scenes, including kidnapping-related charges. This arrest not only took down the scammers, but also brought relief to their numerous victims. Barbara, Amanda, and Sophia were charged in connection with a series of staged accident scams that victimized numerous unsuspecting drivers in Las Vegas. The trio faced charges ranging from conspiracy to defraud, auto burglary, to attempting to obtain money by false pretense. Number 3. Phishing City. The city of Fort Lauderdale fell victim to a cunning phishing scam, resulting in a loss of $1.2 million. This scam has left not just an individual, but an entire city in disbelief, highlighting the sophistication of cybercriminals in the modern age. The scheme unfolded when the city received what appeared to be a legitimate bill from Moss Construction, the contractor overseeing the construction of Fort Lauderdale's new police department headquarters. The paperwork and documentation accompanying the request for payment were meticulously forged, bearing an uncanny resemblance to the company's normal invoices. City officials made a $1.2 million payment to the contractor. It was only later that the unthinkable happened, and the city learned that they had been conned by a cybercriminal impersonating Moss Construction. This scam involved the hackers gaining access to the construction company's information, files, and processes. They then manipulated the system to send what appeared to be a legitimate invoice, but with altered bank account details, and so they were able to siphon off a massive amount of money. In the wake of the incident, Fort Lauderdale police, in collaboration with other law enforcement agencies, started an investigation to track down the criminals and recover the lost funds. While the city is hopeful of regaining the $1.2 million, the process of reversing wire transfers is time-consuming, but the bank is on it. Moss Construction, the unwittingly implicated contractor, issued a statement saying that the hackers had exploited their good name and publicly available information for the scam. They said they would offer full cooperation with the ongoing investigation. Fort Lauderdale's mayor, Dean Trantalis, expressed the urgency of reinforcing protocols to prevent such incidents from occurring, acknowledging the growing frequency of cyber scams. In an era where digital security is paramount, the story of an entire city falling prey to such a scheme stands as a testament to the ever-present threat of cybercrime. And isn't it interesting how the bank can recover the money stolen from the city, but they tell the average victims, oh well, it's your own fault. There's a life lesson in there somewhere. Number 2. The Mustard Squirter. Sir Alan Bennett, a renowned English playwright, fell victim to a cleverly executed scam back in 2010 that still serves as a valuable lesson in street smarts. The incident took place in broad daylight in North London. Bennett had just withdrawn £1,500 from a local bank. As he headed towards a nearby store, a middle-aged woman approached him, offering to help remove an ice cream stain from the back of his coat. This seemingly friendly offer led to a critical mistake. Bennett removed his coat, which contained the envelope with the £1,500, and handed it over to the woman. As she and another woman assisted him in cleaning the coat, a third person, a man in his 50s, offered some tissues to help with the task. Once the job was complete, the women abruptly disappeared. Bennett, feeling grateful for the stranger's assistance, realized his costly error when he was about to get into his car. The envelope containing the £1,500 was gone. He immediately reported the theft to the police and the store security team, but the lack of surveillance cameras covering the area left him with little hope of recovering recovering the money. The scam, Bennett later learned, had a name: the Mustard Squirter. It's an old but effective technique used by scammers in various parts of the world, and it's often seen in Spain. The con involves distracting the victim by appearing helpful, like pretending to clean a stain or spill, only to make off with their valuables while the victim is preoccupied. Bennett's story is a reminder of the need to remain vigilant in public places, particularly after withdrawing a significant amount of money from an ATM. It shows the importance of never taking off clothing with valuables in them, especially in the presence of unfamiliar individuals, and paying attention to your stuff. In the end, Bennett reflected on the incident, emphasizing that it was his trust that suffered the greatest. And really, when you think about it, the scam is pretty slick. If you have a nice jacket on and someone spills mustard or ice cream or something, the stain will set in fast and it'll be ruined, so it must be dealt with. Is your jacket worth more than what's in your pockets after leaving the ATM? Probably not, but you're still not going to want to ruin your jacket. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here for our past release on how this guy robbed a bank and was able to vanish for 50 years. Number 1. Never stop scamming. Nigerian Fiseo Oluwafemi was arrested, or rearrested, for masterminding a $3 million email fraud scam from within Sydney's Villawood Detention Center. The arrest shed light on the determination of individuals involved in online scams. Oluwafemi was accused of not only orchestrating a massive email fraud, but doing so from a place where you might assume such activities were impossible: jail. The email fraud scam, while not uncommon, is typically executed from various locations, often hidden behind layers of anonymity. What set Oluwafemi's case apart is that he ran his operation while locked up, emphasizing the extent to which scammers are willing to go to exploit vulnerable individuals. The scam involves sending emails from spoofed addresses, persuading recipients to give sensitive information such as credit card details and passwords, as well as having them send money in exchange for love or merchandise. These emails prey on the unsuspecting, taking advantage of their emotions and trust. Authorities said he directed the scam with 2 women and 1 man, all of African descent. Harriet Bangura was the only accomplice identified by name. Oluwafemi's operation was shut down when law enforcement raided the detention center, confiscating 16 mobile phones and numerous SIM cards. The arrest was part of an effort to dismantle organized criminal groups involved in fraudulent activities. Oluwafemi faced several charges related to directing the criminal group, dealing with proceeds of crime, and possessing identity information for illicit purposes. The audacity and creativity displayed by individuals like Oluwafemi serve as a reminder that those who engage in scams are continuously adapting to law enforcement's efforts. The fact that this occurred within a detention center goes to show the creative lengths determined scammers are willing to go. Like, Oluwafemi really wanted to continue scamming, didn't he? Probably when he was a kid and they asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said, "Scammer." 4 days before his passing, Thomas Randall's family learned his big secret. He was wanted by the U.S. Marshals for robbing a bank in 1969. Just like how any family would be, they were in shock. It all started with a Steve McQueen movie. Thomas was born in Cleveland, Ohio. He grew up in the 50s and late 60s, idolizing cool, big-screen actors like James Dean and Marlon Brando. Of course, Dean and Brando often portrayed morally gray characters doing somewhat immoral things. But none of these characters had the same effect as Steve McQueen's character in The Thomas Crown Effect. The film is about a billionaire named Thomas Crown who steals $20 million from a bank in Boston. It came out when our Thomas was 19 years old. He watched one of his idols live out the romantic life of a bank robber. Thomas Crown lived in Boston, a more well-known city than Cleveland, Ohio, where Randall lived. But Steve McQueen's Thomas wasn't cool because of where he lived or what he did. He was cool for how he did it, which was why Thomas idolized the character in real life. Thomas Crown didn't steal because he needed the money. He stole for fun. He treated it like a game. Randall saw him play bank robber on the big screen and wanted to play too. He wanted to be like Steve McQueen. He wanted to know what it felt like to pull off a heist. However, Thomas needed to take baby steps and work his way up to professional bank robber. If he wanted to be like McQueen's character, he'd have to start acting, dressing, and drinking like him too. According to the U.S. Marshals report from 1969, Thomas drove an MG sports car, sipped expensive gin, and showed off his prowess for golf and billiards. When he turned 20, Thomas got a job as a low-level bank worker. Everyone expects a bank robber to be a gun-toting masked criminal waving a burlap bag at whimpering employees. Thomas knew he could not recreate this Steve McQueen heist. Instead, Thomas's plan was to rob the bank from the inside. His job made the heist like stealing candy from a baby, or, in this case, stealing money right out of the vault. When the tellers needed more money and they're registered, Thomas's job was to go into the vault and get it. So if someone saw him pillaging through the bank vault, they wouldn't ask any questions. As far as they knew, Thomas was just doing his job. Thomas bragged to his friends about how easy it would be to rob a bank. Of course, they thought his claims were outlandish and borderline delusional. Most heists ended badly for the heistee after all. They probably assumed Thomas was all talk, but he wasn't. On a lovely morning in 1969, Thomas Randall, known then as Theodore Conrad, walked into the Society National Bank of Cleveland and only a few minutes later walked out with $215,000 in a brown paper bag. He also had a carton of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey in true McQueen fashion. According to bank records, Thomas divided the money carefully. He took 1,500 $100 bills, 1,200 $50 bills, and 250 20s. Today, Thomas's payload would be worth around $1.7 million. The bank didn't even notice they were missing any funds until Monday when Thomas didn't show up for work in the morning. They soon discovered he was missing, along with $215,000. They alerted the U.S. Marshals, who launched a manhunt for young Theo. His face was plastered in newspapers all around Ohio. The FBI even put him on the most wanted list, where he would appear quite frequently as dozens of law agencies across the country searched for him. Some people thought Theo, now Thomas, fled to 3 likely locations: California, Paris, and Hawaii. However, none of these locations were proven by law enforcement. They were just false alarm sightings of Thomas. One Ohio couple thought they saw him in Hawaii 3 months after the heist. They told police that they were sitting at a tiki bar in the Princess Kailani Hotel on Waikiki Beach when they had a strange encounter with a fellow guest. The couple was relaxing and trying to enjoy their vacation, so they began chatting with a man at the bar. A few minutes into their conversation, the couple mentioned Cleveland, Ohio. Suddenly, the man's attitude changed. He excused himself to use the bathroom and never came back. Not long after meeting the strange man, the Cleveland couple saw a picture of Thomas in the papers. They called the police, telling authorities they had seen the wanted bank robber at their hotel only a couple days ago, although he probably wasn't still in the bathroom. The local authorities in Waikiki searched everywhere for the man at the bar. Eventually, they got a lead at an apartment complex near the hotel, but the man had left already. The landlord said the man paid with cash, which of course, the police couldn't trace. They still aren't 100% sure if that was Thomas or just someone who resembled him. So where did Thomas go? What kind of life did he lead as a wanted man? The incident in Hawaii was the only lead U.S. Marshals would find on Thomas's location for decades. They still believe he was there, but escaped and went back to the United States mainland. After the Hawaii sighting, the Marshals received more tips from all around the U.S. One came in from Washington, D.C., another came from Inglewood, California. The Marshals even got a call from Oregon saying they'd seen Thomas. He apparently showed up in the picturesque outlaw country of West Texas. If the Marshals got a call, they dropped everything and went to that location. However, they never once stopped to check the city Thomas was actually living in, the city where he spent 30 years hiding from authorities, Boston. It made sense, though. The Thomas Crown Affair was filmed in Boston, and Randall even lived a few blocks away from the filming location. He could probably sense McQueen's presence. Thomas did hop around a bit, but eventually he settled down in the Boston area. He started a family, built a career, and became a well-liked member of his suburban community. The man in the proverbial wanted posters was Theodore Conrad, the audacious bank robber. He changed his name to Thomas Randall, who, by contrast, was an innocent suburbanite who lived a remarkable life. Thomas quickly realized that he couldn't live off his heist money forever. As he started running out of cash, he searched for work in the area. He didn't find anything substantial. He must have known where people were looking for him because Thomas went to one of the few regions U.S. Marshals didn't, Florida. He found work in the prestigious Pembroke Country Club. He started off as a golf instructor and worked his way up to teaching pro. Yes, Thomas was technically a pro golfer. He held the secondary, but still esteemed, title of assistant golf pro. Thomas played in the Winter Tour for 1 year. He retired early to a comfortable management position at Pembroke, where he earned a steady salary for several years. According to his wife and children, Thomas genuinely loved golf. Becoming a pro golfer probably wasn't the best career choice for one of the most wanted men in America, but it was worth the risk. After all, what would Thomas Crown do? Randall eventually quit his job at Pembroke and pursued his other McQueen-inspired passion, cars. Thomas retired from golf in the 70s and stayed in Boston full-time, where he started a luxury car dealership. He named the business Woburn Foreign Motors. Through Woburn, Thomas sold all kinds of vehicles, but he especially loved working on and selling Range Rovers and Volvos. He spent nearly 40 years in the car business until his forced retirement in 2021. Cancer forced him to hang it up, a disease that plagued the last few years of Thomas's life. Thomas spent those years caring for his wife, Kathy, and his daughter, Ashley. Of course, they were still blissfully unaware of their father and husband's criminal past. They only knew Thomas Randall, not the wanted bank robber, Theodore Conrad. Thomas was a car salesman who loved to cook for his family. He'd spend hours in the kitchen experimenting with new recipes. When the family of 3 sat down for dinner, he'd always ask them if he should make the dish again. Unfortunately, and somewhat ironically, Thomas was not good with money. In 2014, he filed for bankruptcy. And by the time he passed away in 2021, Thomas was flat broke. His family could never have imagined their loving family man was once rich in stolen bank money. That was until he told them the truth. Thomas revealed his 1969 bank heist 4 days before he passed away. His family chose to admit the crime from his obituary. Of course, that didn't stop the news from getting out. The U.S. Marshals released their findings in a public report which finally closed a case that had gone unsolved for over 50 years and was led by 2 generations of marshals. U.S. Marshal John K. Elliott nearly spent his entire life looking for Thomas. In 1969, Elliott was a marshal in Cleveland and was the first person the bank called when they discovered the robbery. Elliott chased every lead he could get, but as we now know, those leads were just the breadcrumbs of a wild goose chase. Elliott started on the case in 1969 and hunted Thomas until 1990. However, Elliott's son, Peter J. Elliott, says his father never stopped searching for Thomas. After his retirement, Peter says he remembers his father keeping up with any leads the U.S. Marshals had on Thomas. He even investigated some leads himself. Peter recalls his father telling him how Thomas, or Theodore as he knew him, was the one fugitive who got away. Elliott passed away in 2020, 1 year before Thomas confessed his crimes. So unfortunately, Elliott never got closure on the case that spanned his entire career and life. Before Elliott died, however, the U.S. Marshals, currently on Thomas's case, shared some news with the retiree. They were getting close to finding Thomas. They told Elliott they'd found a connection between 2 documents in Thomas's name. Peter was the marshal leading the investigation and remembers telling his father the news personally. The news also came with a word of thanks. Elliott had compiled most of the research used in the Conrad investigation, including a document signed by Thomas Randall. The signature on the pre-69 document was compared to the signature on a more recent version. Marshals compared the T in Thomas and Theodore and determined the same hand must have written both signatures. It took Peter and his team about a year to make the connection. By that point, Thomas was already on his deathbed and he'd confessed to the crime. Arresting Thomas would have been pointless. Peter knows his dad will rest easier knowing they found him regardless of whether or not Thomas was prosecuted. Thomas Randall lived the life he always dreamed of before passing away on May 18, 2021. Who could ask for anything more? Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you think is better, hip-hop music after 2010 or hip-hop music before 2010.